everyone to our webinar today, where we're going to be talking about the ins and outs of usage, consumption, outcome-based pricing, and because everything's involved in it, we'll probably talk about AI at some point or another. Being joined today by Chris Brubaker from Postscript. Chris, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited for this. By the way, everyone, I'm James McArthur. I'm the VP of Product Advocacy here at New. And our goal today is we just want to bring together our perspectives. So talk a little bit about what the strategy was. This is about Postscript and your journey. So I want to hear the ins and outs of how did this journey start? Where did it, the areas, to the extent you can talk about it, where they went wrong.
Yeah.
And to the extent that you want to celebrate it, where things went really right, and where you are now, and kind of what your thinking is around this world, and then finally, again, if we have time, we'll talk about how AI is changing it. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Awesome. So let's get us started. Tell us about first you, and then kind of your journey here at Postscript.
Yeah. So my name is Chris. I am the Senior Vice President of Finance at Postscript. I've been here about 4 years now. My title's a little bit of a misnomer because I have finance and accounting, but I also own analytics and revenue operations. And so I really get to span kind of the breadth of pricing, usage metrics, everything like that. My actual first exposure to outcome-based pricing was around 8 years ago. I was working at a company called Opcity, which was a real estate technology company. We essentially matched, when you go on like Zillow or whatever, and you submit your information to look at a house, it just gets shot into the ether. It used to. Opcity sat right after that step and essentially aimed to match leads from home search websites with agents. But our pricing model worked in that the agents didn't pay anything up front to use our service. Instead, they paid a percentage of their commission on the back end if they were able to successfully close one of the leads that we generated for them. And so that's really where I learned about the power of outcome-based pricing and usage-based pricing, and how it can really align incentives between the users of your product and the company to ensure that everything's marching towards that right thing, right? Because all we wanted to do at Opcity was get better at helping agents close houses instead of wasting time talking to people who weren't going to buy. And so I've been able to apply that sort of throughout my career. And when I came over to Postscript about 4 years ago, they had in place sort of a legacy credit-based model. So it was sort of consumption-based pricing. There was a mix of SaaS and consumption. People would buy a bank of credits up front. It would be consumed when they send text messages. Postscript sends text messages for online retailers to their customers and their subscribers. And so they would consume those credits. But what we found kind of early on in that journey was that the credit and consumption model was often confusing for our customers, and they felt like it didn't help them understand how to best drive the results of their business. And so over the years, we've pivoted to more of a true usage model where we have pricing for different message types and different ways that they use our product, and they have clear tracking of how much they're spending on that, and they get billed at the end based on their actual usage. There's no wasted credits. There's no rollover. There's none of that, which has really helped. And then we've also added on a couple other pricing models over the time, including more outcome-based pricing models in a product we call SMS Sales, where we actually have an AI plus human in the loop group that helps our customers close deals. They help them convert people who sign up for their text message list but don't buy anything into actual customers, and then pay us a commission on that transaction.
That's awesome. And it sounds like the journey, it's an interesting journey you've been on. You're in a classic department of all kind of situation. You start off with outcome-based pricing, which is always I love the idea of outcome-based pricing. I've always loved the idea of outcome-based pricing because it's we're all successful when we do it together.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't own that outcome, it becomes hard.
Right.
And moving over to the traditional usage model for y'all, it's interesting. So how have you seen, because as we all lived through 2022, we all kind of survived through 2023, and now everything seems to be, well, it's still a little bit squiggly, But with that, we've seen this constant shift towards like different, and you're experiencing some of this on your own, where it's like with the birth of AI, we're back to a world where SaaS companies need to do COGS based pricing. We're also back to a world where everyone's coming up with 100 new products a week, and customers are expecting an incredible amount of flexibility. How much has that played into your push towards both these differentiated models and this usage based pricing?
It plays a huge role in it, right? And in our industry in particular, selling to the e-commerce industry, they've had a particularly challenging couple of years after the rocket ship that was 2020 and 2021. And then, as markets mature, they get a lot smarter about how they think about their business, right? And so you went from like a lot of people like shipping t-shirts out of their mom's garage into these like true now like enterprise e-commerce businesses with Shopify showing the growth that it is. And so as you start getting like more mature operators, people who think about the details and like what happens, they start to think about, okay, I don't want to pay for something that's not driving the results of my business. And so being able to directly align your pricing with their usage and their outcomes helps you do things like ROI calculations better. It helps you really prove the value of your product. It also helps the customers feel comfortable that they're paying for something that they're getting value. We're sort of ahead of the AI curve because in text messaging, we incur like a true COGS model as opposed to like typical SaaS. And so we were like sort of forced into it a little bit earlier. But definitely with the AI stuff too coming out as we add AI to our products, really understanding like how many tokens do we consume to like drive our product? How do we price that in a way that like is attractive to our customers, but still make sure that we can, be a profitable and efficient business? It adds a lot of wrinkles to it.
Yeah, it's become just so much more complicated now. And it's interesting. I love the direct correlation between like, okay, you've done text messaging forever, which is, yeah, you have carrier fees. You're always going to have carrier fees. There's never going to be a moment where the carrier is like, you know what? This one's on us. It's fascinating to me that as you've branched out, and this usage has gotten more and more complex, and the ways people have used, because text messaging is not the same as it was even 5 years ago. And shout out to ZERP era. But when we talk about like doing outcomes based pricing in the world of text messaging, where the floodgates have been opened, they've been opened for a while, but also the data usage on even basic text messages has gone through the roof. How are y'all managing that kind of complexity from your side, which is people are using text messages for more than they've ever used them before? They're trying to do, now we're trying to do video, we're trying to do, you got all these different things getting introduced into it. How is that impacting the way y'all are doing business from a flexibility standpoint?
Yeah, one of the great things about a usage pricing model is that we're able to really target how much we're charging for things, right? Whereas, in the history, maybe you would have a credit-based model or you'd have like a fixed fee model where you have to try and predict the usage for customers and like the mix of how that usage is being, consumed. And now we're able to truly say things like, if you want to send a basic text message with just like, words and emojis, it costs you this much. If you want to send something with an image, it costs you this much. If you want to send something with a video, it costs you this much. And if you want to send something using our AI infinity testing product, where AI actually infinitely iterates on the copy of your message and tests it against other control groups, then it costs you a little bit more than that, right? And that accounts for the different underlying cost structures that we have to deal with. It also takes, not like to self-promote FP&A, but it takes a really robust and really thoughtful finance team to be able to understand, peel back, and model those cost structures so that you can ensure that you're covering your costs and building in your margin, right? While not overshooting the mark and making it something that is unattractive for the customer.
Yeah, FP&A are one of the they and RevOps, which you get to control both. So, whew, plus to you, are like the offensive line for the teams. And we were talking about fantasy football right before this, which is why I'm using that. But it's like you only notice them when things really go wrong. The reason there's legitimately a reason why 95% of people can only name one lineman in the NFL, and he doesn't even play anymore. Um, and you all know who I'm talking about. Go Birds. But it's but the reality is that for y'all, it's coming up with all of those different models and everything. It's great, but talk to me a little bit about what you have sitting underneath, because it can't be easy tying this into how do y'all deal with quoting? How are y'all dealing with, and again, I'm from a CPQ company. It's hard for me not to go this route. But how are you tying everything in to the way you're actually doing business, which is quoting things out all the way through to the invoicing side?
Yeah, I mean, we've learned a lot of lessons along the way, right? Starting at the top, like we we used to have like a very simple quoting model where we basically quoted the price for the thing that people used the most and then just did whatever on the rest of it, assuming that the volume was low enough that it didn't make a major difference overall, which held for a little while. And then as companies got smarter and got more creative with how they're using our product, that became not sustainable anymore. And so, shout out to our RevOps team. They've done an incredible job really building out the order form in a way that's flexible so that we can ingest all that different information and present it in clear ways to the customer. Our enablement team has done a ton of work in coaching our AEs and our BDRs on how to talk about the business, how to talk about the value of the different types of messages, the different ways to use our product. And then we've tied that all in with FP&A and RevOps staying incredibly close on the sort of like quote to contract portion of it. Yeah. One actually, you said to get into AI, like one of the ways that we helped do this scalably and sustainably is we spent a bunch of time building out a really robust, basically calculator that helps us understand the unit economics of each deal based on how they're using the product, how each thing is priced, what their volumes are, what their growth rates are, things like that. And we like hand tested that for a while where, RevOps would collect the information, basically set up a flow to collect the information from the AEs. FP&A would run it by hand and check that everything made sense. But when it became formulaic enough, we got into Cursor and we built an entire Slack app that like automated that process, right? And so as you understand enough of the underlying data, you can take the steps to like really simplify the process, put it into a formula, and then make it so that you have like clear thresholds of like what's acceptable, what needs human review, and what clearly is never going to work. And then you can cut down the time that RevOps and FP&A and the AEs spend manually going through deals, checking things, talking about things, keep that down to just the ones that really need the attention and let the rest of them handle formulaically.
Yeah, it's kind of this is a thing that I talk about a lot when we're doing like trainings and stuff, which is like our goal is building a highway. We're building like in implementations, like the number one job here is we're building a highway. 90% of traffic goes through without a problem. It's just the emergency bathroom break or the emergency gas stop. It's the the incidents that you need to make ways for people to get off so that they can actually get the things they need that come up that you don't expect. And sounds like you're doing an awesome job building that in. It's one thing you mentioned there in that I would love to talk to, because this was a big topic when we were talking about usage last week, which is how are you communicating? Like when you communicate with your customers, how are you getting ahead of the fact that like the new marketing intern just sent 10,000 text messages and it's going to cost them $8,000 because they included the longest video in the history of time in the text message? How do you get ahead of that with your customers?
Yeah, we try to be really proactive with our customers. We've built our app in a way that tracks their usage so that they can see it real time whenever they log in to the app. So they're not surprised by a bill at the end of the month. We also have like billing threshold triggers built in. And so, we're a tech messaging company. So you put in your phone number, you put in a threshold you want to see. And if you exceed that threshold, you get a text message. And so, we don't have a way to proactively stop that marketing intern from sending that campaign, but at least once the first time it happens, you'll get a text message that says like, hey, your budget was $2,000 this month, you spent $6 already, and it's the 19th of August. They'll be like, well, what happened? And also, because they didn't get that text message yesterday, it must have all happened today. So they can go in and check and figure it out. We also proactively display, like, we built in estimators so that, like, when you go in and you build out a campaign flow, you have to define your segment, so you know roughly how many people you're going to send it to. That may change between now and when you send it, but not like in huge numbers. It tells you exactly how many text messages exist in that flow, and it estimates based on the branches, like the total volume there, and it'll show you the actual like cost that we estimated it'll be. It's not perfect, right? It's not going to say this campaign will cost you $604 and it will cost you $600. It might be $599, it might be $612, but it gives you at least a reasonable estimate up front so that when the marketer's doing their job, they have an idea of how that's going to impact their budget for the month.
That's awesome. And how involved? So when you're building those calculators, I'm assuming that is a massive group effort. How much of that? I'm assuming it's product side for the most part, product and eng for the most part. But it's like, how involved is your team? How involved is RevOps? How are you building this into that workflow for your team?
So we essentially have a sort of like a pricing consulting committee where we have somebody from product marketing, somebody from product, somebody from RevOps, and somebody from finance. And really the four of us get together and we talk about these things. So anything that impacts dollars or displays a dollar sign anywhere in the app goes through that committee. And then we can branch off and like add workflows out to people. So when we built that estimator in the first place, engineering scoped it. We came to that committee and said, okay, like, what are the things we need to do to think about the calculations? Are there pieces we're missing in our formula? Can we run a couple like hand-based tests of this to see if the math's working? And we can kind of allocate those out to the teams that make the most sense to own those workflows, and based on who has capacity. FP&A and RevOps both sort of lend each other to be like backup for the other when there's not enough capacity.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's the perfect match I've always had. Well, from FP&A standpoint, I've always had like I'm revenue operator, obviously, but from like the FP&A standpoint, they've always been my like lean on when it comes to matters of pricing or matters of kind of thinking about, okay, what's the best way for us to do this and not lose money? And so I love that partnership. And it sounds like you're also building out those governance processes on your side in a really intelligent way. So to that end, how did you get everyone into the room to agree to all of the different definitions? Because I know everything is like herding cats when it comes to getting every single department to agree to specific things. So how do you end up not in analysis paralysis on all of this? Because it's a lot. And B, how do you get everyone to agree on basic definitions and go forward?
Yeah, it's a big undertaking. Like, I'm not going to downplay that. It takes a lot of stakeholder management, and it takes really strong relationships. And that's why I think like in RevOps and in FP&A, the like biggest criteria whether you are going to be successful in your career is, can you build those relationships and can you manage stakeholders? And by establishing a reputation for that, it helps to then get RevOps or finance to be the lead on some of these projects, and they can really drive it home. You also have to be incredibly good operators, right? You have to have your checklist, your spreadsheet, your timelines, and like really be able to lay it out for people that like, here are the ways that we're going to go about testing this, defining this, establishing it. Here's how we're going to communicate it out to teams, and here's the timeline that we're going to do it on, so that you can always have go no checkpoints, go no go checkpoints, and also understand that like you can iterate, right? You don't have to get pricing right on the first time. You want to get it good. You don't want to be disappointed, and you don't want to like spike your product adoption tests because your pricing is bad. But also, it's okay to change pricing later. And so like learning how to like run those exercises and run those experiments with the right sample sizes so that you can then expand them out and test and iterate from there. Honestly, one of the biggest challenges that we run into is that we've built a lot of things in-house. And so we don't use new, right? Or any other like, software like new. And so when we make changes to our processes, it means that our RevOps team has to change the way that the quote flow goes through the contracting process, or we have to build out a bespoke one because it's this like ad hoc experiment phase. We have to change the quote process to ingest that within our Slack app that we've built. Our billing engine was built entirely bespoke by our engineering team. And so engineering needs to do a sprint to like update the billing module. And so, I say that we can always test and iterate, but for us, it's a very expensive thing to be able to do that. And I think that, in the world today, there are tools that can really help with that. And so if you are in a company where you have a lot of usage-based pricing or you experiment with pricing a lot, if I was gonna go back and rebuild this company from the start, I would be leaning on a tool to be able to allow us to iterate faster and to be able to ingest that information and make changes without the massive flow chart that like starts at AE enablement and goes all the way through engineering and accounting to be able to ingest that entire process. We have to touch too many people right now.
Yeah, it's like the thing that we always say, and also thank you for getting ahead of my if you had a magic wand question. Um, but but one of the things we always say is that any of the most legacy systems were built with a build here, deploy here, build here, deploy here, and it's like new, for example, we built it with a build once, deploy everywhere mentality, so that when you're talking about those pricing variations. And I think like it's something that when you were building this didn't exist.
Right.
Like it just flat out didn't exist. And it's the tools are changing so rapidly as this is not a pitch for new, even though this is a new webinar, whatever. But the reality is that for people that are trying to kind of wave that magic wand or see into the future, it's what I'm hearing is not necessarily don't worry about getting it exactly right. Don't worry about knowing everything you're doing, but set yourself up for scalability, set yourself up for flexibility as much as you can.
Yeah, especially the flexibility. I think early on, especially when you're first starting to experiment with usage or outcome-based pricing, but even in a world in which you introduce new products or you like introduce new tiers and things like that, the ability to iterate, test, refine those is instrumental and it can be the difference between like a good year and an okay year because you're able to make those changes proactively.
Yeah, because if it takes you 6 weeks to make a single change to a product, then every single adjustment, micro adjustment you're making is actually 6 weeks of work.
Yep.
That's
compounds.
Yeah, it does. And so taking like the next stage of this, which is the part every revenue operator and finance person end of quarter like cringes on the inside on. Let's talk about commissions and how that relates to all of this. So, how has your commissions journey changed? And like, because usage and commissions it's one of the hardest questions that revenue operators and finance teams have to answer. So it's like, how has that evolved for you? How have you gone through that journey to the extent that you can or want to talk about it? We can have a much more generic conversation.
No, I'll try and stay high level enough that I won't get myself into trouble here. But I'll shout out our AE team that we have an incredibly flexible and understanding AE team that has given us a lot of grace to experiment and play around. And I think, we've built the trust over time with them that we'll get it figured out and they'll do very well for themselves once they do what we do. But I think the key thing there is like when things are early stage, when they're not proven yet, when you can't build a true funnel model and be able to like assign a quota that's attainable without like a ton of finagling, then compensation should be more spiff based and more incremental to what their like OTE is, right? It's not fair for somebody to have to earn 20% of their OTE through a product that your company doesn't even know how to price yet. It just like, it doesn't make sense to put that burden on the sales team. And so we try and adhere to that mentality as best as we can. And then we iterate and adjust from there. And so, like this quarter, we're Well, in late Q2, we launched a brand. We knew it was going to be a hit. We didn't know how quickly we could onboard shops, and we also didn't know what their usage was going to be. So like we knew that they would use it, but the amount they would spend on that product could vary massively. And so what we did instead is we put sort of a bounty program on for the AEs and the BDRs and our CSMs because they were cross-selling it into existing groups, right? And basically said that like, it doesn't matter what they actually spend on the product, attaching this is going to be worth X, right? And we said, we're gonna run that through the end of the year. And we promise you that by the end of the year, we'll have a much better idea of how volume is going to look like on there to be able to tier this out and like give you the right quota credit for it going forward. I've seen other companies do it much like more usage based where they get a commission on usage over the future. We candidly don't love that model, and our AEs don't love that model because it makes their comp way too swingy and it focuses them too much on things that they sold 2, 3, 4 quarters ago rather than focusing on the opportunities in their pipeline.
That makes perfect sense. It's basically keep it simple and keep it fair. And if you're going to experiment, put that in the plus category of commissions. Makes perfect sense. And so you touched on this, and this is my final question for you, which is talk to me about how critical actually having, and not the like ZERP era version of this, but actually having product market fit matters when it comes to usage and when it comes to actually like how much it matters that you need to know your customer and know how they're going to use the product.
Yeah, I'd say it's really the key. Like in the experimentation phase, like you're going to be figuring a lot of things out. But when it comes to scaling a usage model, product market fit is the only way that you can plan your company from year to year. With seat-based SaaS, you can fall back a little bit on knowing how much money you have in the bank, how long that lasts, and if you start seeing signal that your churn rate is spiking because you don't have the product market fit you thought, you have time to pivot because you're already in the bank. You already know what your pipeline looks like. On usage-based, especially customer-friendly usage-based products, if like the mega companies, right? Snowflake doesn't care if your company goes under hardship and you're going to decrease your usage by 50% because you've already committed to paying them that 90% of what you thought your usage was going to be up front. And you have to do that. But really customer first usage companies where usage over the commitment amount drives the bulk of your revenue, it can turn on a dime. And so having that product market fit and really understanding your customers and being able to spend enough time talking to your customers, understanding your customers and forecasting their business makes a massive difference. We ran into the tariff situation with our e-com businesses this year where they were staring down their COGS increasing by, between 10 to 50% for some of our customers. And if we weren't proactively talking to our customers and understanding how that impacts their business, we would have made some of the wrong decisions this year. And if we didn't have really strong product market fit, we might have lost customers altogether.
That is a great cap to this, which is basically like communicate. It's all about the customer. Because if you're building a usage product and you're not all about the customer, at the end of the day, you're building a lot more of a skydive than a roller coaster, which is what ideally everything's always going up. But
it's why NDRs are so swingy in usage businesses. In the good times, they're going to have the strongest NDRs by far. And in the bad times, they're going to get hit a little bit. But it also means that your customers are paying for the value they're getting.
Yeah, and also sounds like if you're this is a plug for the FP&A department. If you're in a usage-based business, have a good FP&A department. Awesome. Thank you for coming, Chris. This was awesome. Thank you for all of you out there who listened to this. We're happy to answer any questions that you have coming over in the next couple of weeks. And Chris, how can people connect with you if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I'm usually pretty responsive to messages if you have follow-up questions, stuff like that. That's going to be the best way to find me.
Awesome. I am also on LinkedIn, or you can email me at james@new.io. I'm excited to be here, excited to talk to you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, y'all. I think the first key point is when you're thinking through usage and outcome-based pricing models, it's essential to talk to your customers, understand your customers, and understand what they value. Because just throwing a usage component onto your business model doesn't make any sense unless the customers can tie the value of what they're getting from your product to that usage curve. And so that's, if you're not able to do that, then you're just like glomming onto a trend without really understanding what usage-based pricing is supposed to do.
It's almost like usage-based pricing was the outcome-based pricing all along.
Right.
Yeah, it's everything you've said just kind of funnels down to the customer first and actually being customer first, not in a kind of like how much do we make the most money humanly possible from our customers' perspective, but like how do we partner with our customers to grow?
Right, exactly. And customer growth is going to do way more for your business over the long term than like eking out 5 or 10% more revenue per widget or token or whatever. For FP&A and RevOps teams, assuming that most like quote to cash lives sort of within those two realms. Yeah. When you decide to start experimenting with, building into, or pivoting fully into a usage-based or outcome-based pricing model, always take a beat to think about the next 1, 2, even 4 quarters in the future and how the like range of changes could impact your team and how you build it, so that you can spend a little bit of time up front to build it in a flexible way that helps you be nimble and helps you really stay close. It's sort of a curve, right? It's the midwit meme. At the very beginning, it's like, don't build anything for billing. There's software that can do that. In the middle, it's like, what your business is, build it because you own it, and then you can do whatever you want with it. And then there's the other end where it's like, well, no, there's software that can do this better and more efficiently than you can. So there's software for that.
Yeah. And it's almost a question of scale, where it's like, do you have the whole do things that don't scale at the beginning? You're doing things like you're going to build whatever you can build to get things out the door, and you need to do that quickly. And that's not necessarily going to be going and spending $50,000 on a CPQ. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, to your point, in the middle, it's, hey, we need a boost. We need to get something together. We need to streamline this. We've got competent people. Let's put that together. And then at the top, yeah, we need to be auditable for the next 2 years because we're pre-IPO and it's time to actually get our stuff together. You're not doing that off of homegrown.
You don't want to look through my Google sheet that shows all of the quote positions and who approved them.
Yeah, I remember I was consulting with a client back in the day, and they were like, yeah, we are 6 months away from planning our IPO, but we need to have 2 years of data logged in that's auditable and everything. So can you guys upload this 2 years of data into our system? And it was like, yeah, how much is that? And they were like, oh, it's only like 15.